All right, Nick, let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons. I think disappointing into the season for the Falcons makes you wonder, what is this team going to do to counteract it? Well, they have gone ahead and made some moves, some changes to the coaching staff of this team that I think is really important and maybe a sign for bigger change to come down the stretch. We'll get into that story in a minute, but before we get there, I'm Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, the Atlanta Falcons already making some changes when it comes to the coaching staff of this team. Disappointing into the season, kind of a collapse, some would say. That this team, they think they needed to make some major changes. Let's get into the article and we can talk more about it on the other side. This is from NBC Sports. It says the Falcons announced a couple of changes to Raheem Morris's coaching staff on Saturday. They have fired defensive coordinator Jimmy Lake and defensive line coach Jay Rogers. Both coaches joined the staff for the 2024 season. The Falcons finished both 23rd in points and yards allowed while going 8-9 this season. After a thorough evaluation of the season and with careful consideration for our team's future, we deem these moves necessary, Moore said in a statement. These decisions are never easy from the human side of things, and we wish Jimmy and Jay and their families the best. But sometimes you got to move on from the man because the performance has been lackluster. And that was what Raheem Morris was brought to this team to do. Be a defensive guy. Bring the defense up. He's supposed to bring the defensive guys with him, and these guys did not perform. I think it was a really poor showing, especially across the front of this line. Judon never came in and did good stuff. I think just overall, the D line, those guys had to go, and they need to make some more changes. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Falcons fans, in the comment section below, we're talking about changes. We're talking about things that need to change on this team. What are you looking at? What do you think was the biggest weakness outside of maybe the defensive line play for this team? And what do you think could be a really beneficial change going forward? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below on what changes you would make. But nonetheless, Nick, what do you think about these latest moves for the Falcons?
Yeah, the way the season ended. Look, let's be totally honest here about this Atlanta Falcons team. That we brought in Raheem Morris, the Falcons did, not we, the Falcons did, of course. Brought in Raheem Morris. They signed Kirk Cousins, drafted Michael Penix Jr., traded for Matthew Judon. All these kind of moves because they're like, listen, under Arthur Smith, we always underperformed, losing records, missing the playoffs, and a very winnable NFC South. And the end result after all that in the 2024 campaign was a little bit more of the same. Hey, they got the 8 wins, fantastic. Still losing records, still missing the playoffs, and once again, a very winnable NFC South. And right now, accountability needs to happen. And there's a lot of changes that need to be made in the organization, both in the front office, coaches, players across the board. But I really respect Raheem Morris here for firing some of his guys, some of his friends, his coaching colleagues that he really admired. Understanding accountability needs to happen. Because if you look at the numbers here for this Falcons defense, as the report alluded to, 23rd in both points and yards allowed. If you go through these rankings, you'll notice a kind of a trend here. So they're 31st in sacks, 22nd against the pass, 15th against the run, 17th in takeaways, 23rd in points allowed, like you said, and 28th in scoring percentage. Scoring percentage being the number of drives, the percentage of drives that end in a score in the opposition. Well, you'll notice in all those rankings, right, the worst they were 31st, the best they were was 15th. This Falcons defense, despite having a lot of solid players, despite making big moves, trading for a guy like Matthew Judon, for example, having veterans, some young guys, they were average at best in some categories to terrible at others. That ain't going to get it done, especially when you look at their matchups. This is a defense based on a lot of their matchups that should have been a top 10 unit. They played a Justin Fields led Pittsburgh Steelers team. They played a Saints team that was beat up. They played a Cowboys team that was beat up. They even got Cooper Rush for a chunk of that game. They played rookie quarterback Bo Nix. They played the New York Giants. They played the Raiders, right? They played a Chargers team that's more of a defensive team. They got the Panthers twice. Like, this is a team that's defensively should have been in a top 10. The matchups were in their favor. They got talent on both sides of the football. They didn't get it done, right? That's the reality. The players didn't go out and execute. The coaches didn't go out and coach. And Raheem Morris, to his credit, recognizes it, established accountability. These are his guys, right? Lake's his guy. He wanted Lake to be the DC. He recognized, hey, defensive line ain't getting it done. We're not getting enough sacks, not getting enough pressure on the quarterback, and we have guys to do it. Coach has got to go. DC, he didn't get it done. we've got to let him go. And I think that is, as tough as it is a business. It is the right move to make by Raheem Morris to help turn around this Falcons team. Because again, I'm going to keep saying this, I'm blue in the face. They have got the guys. This has been the story of the Atlanta Falcons for the last 4 or 5 years or so. They've got talent, right? They've got offensive line, defensive line, receivers, running backs, linebackers, DBs. They're not a perfect roster by any means, but for the last 3 or 4 years, they've underperformed by at least 2, 3, 4 wins of what they could be. Changes need to happen. Accountability needs to be served. And this first step, I think, here from Raheem Morris is a move in the right direction.
Yeah, Nick, I agree with what you're saying here. I think this was a necessary move. I think it shows that Morris isn't. You hate a coach who's kind of tied to his guys, who gets his buddies in there. And it is almost like a situation we've seen with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not like these are Tomlin's guys, but when they had Matt Canada as offensive coordinator, he underperformed for years. They kept him for a few years longer than they should kept him. And it's very frustrating to fans. It's very frustrating, probably to the players, even when you have guys that are underperforming. They could be the nicest guys. I'm sure Jimmy Lake is a great guy. I'm sure everybody really likes him. He brings a lot of personality. Great, tells good jokes after the game. That's not really what matters here. What matters here is performance on the field. And when you're not performing, people get frustrated and you got to make the appropriate moves. You can't be the Steelers. You can't hang on to guys for 2 years too long and really drag your team down with you. If you have the guys, like you said, this is a Falcons team, they've got the guys. They have the ability here to come out and do some really good things with the talent on this roster. If it's underperforming, you have to figure out what the root cause is. Usually you look at the coaching staff first, pivot from there, keep going, make the necessary changes to get everything aligned, get your talent level aligned with the level of play that you need, and that has something predicated usually with the coaching staff and their performance as well. So good move by Raheem Morris. I'm glad he's not that type of coach where he keeps on to his guys for forever just to, keep his buddies around the team, whatever. I think this is a smart move, and I think it shows the Falcons are willing to change and that they are going to change going into next season.